Okay, testing. Is this thing on? I'm going to just direct you back to your seats. I love that you guys are talking and having a good time. We love doing that. We love communion with each other. It's fantastic to get together with the body. So I'm just happy to see you guys here. And I'm going to waffle just a little bit as people are making their way to their seats. Maybe give you a little bit of a breakdown. So I wasn't sure when I first started prep for this sermon what I was actually going to do. I kind of had a vague notion about how to suffer well, or like what the Bible talks about suffering well, what that looks like. I thought about talking about faith, but nothing was really clicking. I even had like half of the sermon put together, and I just scrapped it all because it just wasn't there. Last week, then, Pastor Trevor, he brought up the book of Job in just one verse, and that inspired me. I'm like, okay, I'll go through the book of Job, and I know it's ambitious, and I am going to go a little long. I apologize right now. I'll try to do my best to speed through it. But we're going to do a 10,000-foot overview of the book of Job, 42 chapters. I will not be reading all of it. So if I had 5 hours to do this, I guarantee you I would take 5 hours, but I respect all your time. So we're not going to do that today. We're going to do 10,000 foot. I'm going to skip a lot. Hopefully what I want to get out of this is that I encourage all of you to go and read the book of Job. By show of hands, how many of you have you read it, like beginning to end as a book, as you would? Ish, some hands here or there. So I have a question that Trevor doesn't do this, so I actually want a response from you guys. What do you think when you hear the book of Job? Like, what are your impressions of the book? What do you think it's about, especially if you haven't read it? Like, anyone who didn't raise your hand? Suffering, yeah, that's a big one. What about the character of Job? When you think about the character of Job as a person, what do you imagine? What are some adjectives that you would imagine? Anything. Shout it out.
Solid, consistent, and reliable.
Reliable, solid, consistent, yeah. Anything else? Other than nothing. Right. Okay, so now we're starting. That's okay. You guys aren't used to this call and response, so maybe if I preach again, just be prepared. I might be asking you to say something too. Okay, so I'll just jump right in. So I've talked about my goals, about what I want to do, a little bit of context before we get into it. The book of Job is actually the oldest book in the Bible. The Bible's not laid out chronologically. Genesis is not the oldest. Job is actually a story. The theory is an oral tradition passed on through humanity before the time of the Jews, because Abraham being the father of all Jews, so this is before him. And the theory is that he actually maintained and wrote it down in the book of the Bible, although there's some ambiguity about that. We're not sure if Abraham wrote it. That is the assumption. So it's a very, very old. We know this for several reasons. One, there's no reference to any Levitical tribes. The sacrifices that they make in the Bible, it's by the patriarch of the family for the atonement for the whole family. So these are some things that would have been practiced before, like Jewish doctrine, the laws were implemented, right? There's also appears to be a general knowledge of God throughout the entire book. Even those who don't know of God or don't believe in God, it's not that they don't know that he exists, right? So that's just generally what we know about the context of the book of Job. Normally, I would read like a chapter here and then go back and then do a chapter and then go back and cover it. We're not going to do that. I'm going to read through a large section to begin with because I think it's important to set the context of where Job begins, okay? So that's what I'm going to do. Prepare yourself. We're going to read a large section of the book. There was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was blameless and upright. Just keep that in your head. Blameless and upright. One who feared God and turned away from evil. There was born to him 7 sons and 3 daughters. He possessed 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 female donkeys, very many servants. So this man was the greatest of all the people in the east. His sons used to go and hold feasts in the house of each other on his day, and they would send and invite their 3 sisters to eat and drink with them. When the days of the feast had run their course, Job would send and consecrate them. He would rise early in the morning and offer burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, "It may have been that my children have sinned and cursed God in their hearts," and thus Job did continually. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord. Sons of God is a unique phrase. It's only ever used to describe direct creations of God, such as angels. Anyway, they came before the Lord, and Satan also came among them. The Lord said to Satan, from where have you come? And Satan answered the Lord and said, well, going to and fro on the earth, and from walking up and down on it. And the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? That there is none like him on earth, a blameless and upright man who fears God and turns away from evil. And Satan answered the Lord and said, does Job fear God for no reason? Have you not put a hedge around him and his house and all that he has on every side? You have blessed the work of his hands, and his possessions have increased in the land. But stretch out your hand and touch all that he has, and he will curse you to your face. And the Lord said to Satan, behold, all that he has is in your hand. Only against him do not stretch out your hand. And so Satan went out from the presence of the Lord. And now there was a day when his sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in the oldest brother's house, and there came a messenger to Job and said, the oxen were plowing and the donkeys were feeding beside them, and the Sabeans fell upon them and took them and struck them down, and the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. Now, as he was still speaking, there came another and said, the fire of God fell from heaven and burned up the sheep and the servants and consumed them all, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, the Chaldeans has formed 3 groups and made a raid on the camels and took them and struck down the servants with the edge of the sword, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And while he was yet speaking, there came another and said, your sons and daughters were eating and drinking wine in their oldest brother's house, and behold, a great wind came across the wilderness and struck the 4 corners of the earth. And it fell upon the young people, and they are dead, and I alone have escaped to tell you. And Job arose, and he tore his robe and shaved his head and fell on the ground and worshipped. And he said, naked I have come from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return. The Lord gave, and the Lord has taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. And in all this, Job did not sin or charge God with wrong. Note that he did acknowledge that the Lord took away. And he did not claim God did wrong. So Satan didn't really waste much time. Kind of sits everything going, and then bang, Job, from the greatest man in the East to having nothing left. And what was his first response was to worship. To me, this is very personally convicting, because I think about the difficulty that I've gone through, and then I think about, compared to Job, I've gone through nothing. I don't know if my first reaction, if I were to lose everything, would be to worship God. So that to me really does strike me. Job is a righteous man, all right? And as we get into this, he does complain a lot. Don't let that distract you from the fact that he is called blameless before God. So, and I'm going to kind of gloss through this part. Same thing happens. The sons of God are before him. Only this time, Satan says, yeah, but we didn't hurt Job, so if I hurt Job, then surely he's going to curse you. And God again says, go ahead, go do it. And so, let's go back. There. So Satan went out from the presence of the Lord and struck Job with loathsome sores, from the soles of his foot down to the crown of his head. And he took a piece of broken pottery with which to scrape himself while he sat in the ashes. So not only did he lose everything, now he's in constant agony, sitting in ashes. And then his wife says to him, do you still hold fast to your integrity? Curse God and die. My goodness. I only hope that if I'm suffering like this, my wife doesn't come up to me and say something like that, because that's kind of harsh. But he said to her, you speak as one of the foolish women would speak. Shall we receive good from God, and shall we not receive evil? And in this, all this, Job did not sin with his lips. There's an easy thing as like a Christian, and I've said it. I'm guilty of saying it. To think that evil, like things that befall us, harm and pain, that is not also from the Lord. There's a verse where it's like God uses all things for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. But it's not just that he uses it. It's that nothing happens apart from his will. The opening of this book is obviously very difficult from a Christian theological perspective. It has a very hard thing for, even me to swallow, that nothing happens apart from God's will. And in fact, if you look at the context, God brought Job up. The devil didn't bring him up. The devil didn't say, hey, look at your servant Job. I bet you I could get him to sin. God brought him up. Something to keep in your head is do not limit God's sovereignty over this world. He is sovereign even over the thing that you are going through right now. He's determined the time, how long you will be in it, and he has determined your salvation from it. We can get distracted by how much pain that we're in now that we forget that God is not finished in our lives. And I already talked about that. See, I have all my notes up here, and then I just talk through the notes, and I skip slides. So now, we meet with his friends. All right, so these are some good buddies of his. Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar. And initially, they sit in silence with Job for 7 days. To me, that kind of sounds like a good friend, right? Your friend is suffering, and you go with him, and you sit in silence for 7 days. I have a hard time sitting in silence for like 10 minutes. So sitting in silence for 7 days with someone who's suffering, this really does, because they get a bad rap, as you'll see, this does show that they are genuine friends of Job. They really do care for him, okay? Keep that in your head, too, because they're going to say some stuff. Job laments his position now. After 7 days, he opens his mouth and he says, "Why is light given to him who is in misery, and life to the bitter soul, who long for death, but it comes not, and dig for it more than the hidden treasure, who rejoice exceedingly and are glad when they find the grave? Why is light given to a man whose way is hidden, who God has hedged in? For my sighing comes instead of bread, and my groanings are poured out like water. For the thing that I fear comes upon me, and what I dread befalls me. I am not at ease, nor am I quiet. I have no rest. My troubles come." So he's distraught, obviously. 7 days, he sits in misery. Every day, I'd imagine he wakes up and remembers that everything he had is lost. So Eliphaz, one of his friends, decides to speak up. And let's see what he has to say to comfort him. He says, "Remember who that was innocent or ever perished, or where were the upright cut off? As I have seen, those who plow iniquities sow trouble and reap the same. By the breath of God they perish, and by the blast of his anger they are consumed. As for me, I would seek God, and to God I would commit my cause." I don't know if you caught that, but Eliphaz is kind of nudging Job a little bit. He goes, "Hey, listen, from what I've seen, wicked people suffer, so maybe you are wicked?" So it's not direct. He's not calling him wicked yet, outright, but his first thing is, listen, maybe you got something to repent for. Now, Job, remember what God says about Job is he is blameless, all right? So Eliphaz is wrong here. So Job responds. He goes, "Remember that my life is breath, and my eye will never again see good. The eye of him who sees me will behold me no more. While your eyes are with me, I shall be gone. As the cloud fades and vanishes, so he who goes down to Sheol does not come up. He returns no more to his house, nor does his place know him anymore." He is absolutely miserable. And he says, "Therefore I will not restrain my mouth. I will speak in the anguish of my spirit. I will complain in the bitterness of my soul." Job's had enough. He's fit to bursting with his suffering, reasonably enough. He doesn't seem to get what Eliphaz was saying. So Job, in desperation, calls out to God. He asks why. And I'm sure it's a question that if you've suffered, you've asked. "How long will you not look away from me, nor leave me alone till I swallow my spit? If I sin, what do I do to you, you watcher of mankind? Why have you made me your mark? Why have I become a burden to you? Why do you not pardon my transgressions and take away my iniquity? For now I shall lie in the earth, and you will seek me, but I shall not be." So Job is right in his assertions here that he has made sacrifices. He is righteous. We know that. The book calls him righteous. He doesn't know why. That's his concern here. Why has this happened to me? Why is this happening to me? And then Bildad talks. He thinks he knows why. And he goes, "How long will you say these things, and the words of your mouth be a great wind?" Does God pervert justice? Or does the Almighty pervert the right? If your children have sinned against him, he has delivered them into the hand of their transgression. And you will seek God and plead with the Almighty for mercy. So Bildad, being a good friend, he says, "Your kids probably deserve to die." That was very nice of you, Bildad. I appreciate you speaking up there. He's not taking the indirect route. He's taking a very direct route here and directly saying, you definitely did something wrong. God does not pervert justice. Your children, they've sinned against him, probably. So, they deserve to die. I would hope that I don't say stuff like that to my friends who are suffering. because A, he's wrong. Like the point of the book here, I'm going to keep hanging on that at the very beginning. He's called righteous. He is called blameless. So his friends all kind of think he did something wrong to deserve this. If you're pure and upright, surely then he will rouse himself for you and restore your rightful habitation. And though your beginning was small, your latter days will be great. And Job responds as truly, I know it's so, but how can a man be in the right before God? If I wish to contend with him, one could not answer him once in 1,000 times. He is wise in heart and mighty in strength. Who has hardened himself against him and succeeded? It's a little bit hopeless. How can I answer him, choosing my words with him? Though I am right, I cannot answer him. I must appeal to mercy from my accuser. To me, this reads as though he believes God is accusing him of something, and that's why he is wrong. Or he believes someone is accusing him of something, right, that he has done, which is half right. He does say something here that is kind of illustrative of his opinion of himself, which I think we should also keep in mind, is that he thinks if he could answer his accuser, he would be found right. So he's justifying himself. This is the beginning of him saying, I am right. I am justified. Let me make my case, right? Job spends the rest of the chapter lamenting, and he wishes for death, and he complains. Again, pretty reasonable, given his state. I would probably be doing the same thing, and worse. I don't think that I have the character of Job. There is no arbiter between us, he says, who may lay his hand on us both. Let him take his rod away from me, and let not dread of him terrify me. Then I would speak without fear of him, for I am not so in myself. So Job insists that if the rod were taken, if the punishment were taken, he would be able to stand before God without fear of him. So Job obviously has this image of himself in his head as being righteous, which he's not wrong about. He's called blameless, right? He's not wrong about this. And he insists he'd plead his case with God. How many of you guys have heard this from other people, right? Like you think, I've heard this a lot, right? Especially from secular communities. There's a comedian who says this a lot, where it's like, if I were to stand before God, I would tell him all the things that he did wrong. I would say, how could you let this happen? How could you let kids get cancer? How could you let evil in the world? They would accuse God, and they would think that they would think themselves right. Job begins to humanize God a little bit. Another folly, in my opinion, I loathe my life. I will give free utterance to my complaint. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. I will say to God, do not condemn me. Let me know why you contend against me. Does it seem good to you to oppress, to despise the work of your hands and favor the designs of the wicked? Have you eyes of flesh? Do you see as man sees? Are your days as the days of man? Or your years as man's years? And you seek out my iniquity and search for my sin, although you know that I am not guilty, and there is none to deliver out of your hand. Again, he's gripping with this question of why is this happening to me? Why is this happening to me? He knows he's just, and God knows that he is just. And that's a question, at this point, I had reading the book as well. Why is this happening to Job? Why would God say yes to the devil when the devil accuses Job of what he accused him of, that he would curse God if he lost everything? Why? Keep that in your head. And remember what Job's current attitude is. And Zophar, Naamathite, answered and said, should a multitude of words go unanswered, and a man full of talk be judged right? Should your babble silence men? And when you mock, shall no one shame you? You say my doctrine is pure and I'm clean in God's eyes, but oh, that God would speak and open his lips to you. Zophar, kind of piling on here, says, hey, listen, you say you haven't sinned, but God knows you did. Again, no specific accusations, right? They're not pointing to anything you did wrong. They're just saying, we know you sinned because you're not perfect. You probably did something to deserve this, and God knows. He's 100% wrong here. He's very confident in being 100% wrong because we know from the benefit of the first chapter here, Job's called blameless, okay? He didn't do something to deserve this, okay? That's not the reason for his suffering, overtly. God even says, and I glossed over it, but God even says, it's like you, to Satan, it's like you have caused me to do this against Job without cause. So it is without cause that this happened to Job, right? Cause meaning an accusation of sin, right? It isn't that God doesn't have a reason, but it isn't because of something Job did. No doubt you are the people This is Job responding. I love this line. No doubt you are the people, and wisdom will die with you. Well, he's like, oh, you guys are idiots. Okay? But I have understanding as well as you. I am not inferior to you. Who does not know such things as these? And he's like, wouldn't I know if I sinned? I'm the laughingstock of my friends. I, who called to God, and he answered me, a just and blameless man, am a laughingstock. Obviously having a hard time with this image of himself, of being righteous, which he is, being brought low. He's having a really hard time with this reality. And actually, he talks about this more than most other complaints. And the thought of one who is at ease, there is contempt for misfortune. It is ready for those whose feet slip. The tents of robbers are at peace, and those who provoke God are secure, who bring their God in their hand. It's like the people who worship idols, they're safe in their tents. God's not doing stuff for them. So it's this comparison. Why do they get to have peace? Why is it they have comfort and I don't? I'm just. Though he slay me, and this is where Job turns back a little bit. Though he slay me, I will have hope in him. Because he does know, he is righteous, he does know that there is hope in the Lord, that God has purpose, and that he is just ignorant of it. Yet, I will argue my ways to his face. This will be my salvation, that the godless shall not come before me. Keep listening to my words, and let my declaration be in your ears. Behold, I have prepared my case. I know that I shall be right. Who is there who will contend with me? For then I would be silent and die. So immediately he recants a little bit. He goes, I have hope in the Lord, an implication of the Lord knowing more than him. And then he says, but I would contend. If the Lord stood right here, I would tell him, and I would be found right. Should a wise man, and Eliphaz is Eliphaz again, so the one who was soft in the beginning, just nudging, this is him. Should a wise man answer with windy knowledge and fill his belly with the east wind? Should he argue in unprofitable talk or in words with which he can do no good? But you are doing away with the fear of God and hindering meditation before God. For your iniquity teaches your mouth, and you choose the tongue of the crafty. Your own mouth condemns you, and not I. Your own lips testify against you. Eliphaz actually kind of has a little bit of a point here when it comes to the lack of the fear of God, because that is what Job is demonstrating. Job is demonstrating that he doesn't fear God in as much as he believes that if God were to be standing before him, he would be able to argue his case against him. So Eliphaz has a point. He's still wrong in as much as assuming that he's done something wrong, but he's not overtly blaming him in this point of doing something specific. And again, I'm missing a lot, right? These are just sections of chapters. The full book has a lot of detail in their arguments. These are not bad arguments. They're just wrong, right? That his friends are making. And nearly every time, they bring it back to the glory and power and wonder and the wisdom of God that no one can understand. So we are missing a lot here, and I want to make this clear. So I'm giving you an overview at this point. This is not the entirety of the book, okay? So I would encourage all of you to read it because it's a very humbling book. Job is bitter. In chapter 16, he says, he has torn me in his wrath. He has hated me. He has gnashed his teeth at me. My adversary sharpens his eyes against me. Men have gaped at me with their mouths. They have struck me insolently on the cheek. They mass themselves together against me. God gives me up to the ungodly and casts me into the hands of the wicked. And then he continues in chapter 17. He expresses his hopelessness at the situation. Chapter 18, Job's good buddy Bildad speaks again. It's pretty short. I'm not going to get into it. Suffice to say, he calls Job, He calls Job wicked through many poetic words. His friends really do tear into him. It's brutal at some point. Chapter 18 is interesting because although Job expresses his hopelessness due to his agony against God's wrath, he knows his Redeemer lives. Here's what he says. It's a little ironic. Oh, that my words were written, and that they were inscribed in a book. Oh, that with an iron pen and lead they were engraved in a rock forever. Not knowing that, hey, Job, good news for you, buddy. They're here. For I know that my Redeemer lives, and at last he will stand on the earth, and after my skin has thus been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I thought that, reading that, it really jumped off the page to me because this is a messianic prophecy in the Old Testament before Abraham. Someone who was close to God knew that his Redeemer would stand on the earth. And as we know as Christians, our Redeemer is Jesus Christ. Here, buddy. That the exalting of the wicked is short and the joy of the godless but for a moment. This is Zophar. He's saying, hey, listen, you had good stuff, but it was taken from you because you're wicked. Right? Yeah, you did something wrong. That's why it was taken from you. The joy of the godless is but for a moment, right? He's making the claim that, look, the wicked, they don't prosper. All of them are cut short, right? And then Job actually points out and says, actually, the wicked do prosper. And he questions God. How often is it that the lamp of the wicked is put out, that their calamity comes upon them, that God distributes pain in his anger, and that they are like straw before the wind and like chaff in the storm that carries away? You say God stores up their iniquity for their children. Let him pay it out to them, that they may know it. Let their own eyes see the destruction, and let them drink the wrath of the Almighty. So I empathize with Job here a lot. Like, how many evil, horrible people are in the world? Like, you turn on the news, and you've got like a dozen of them. They're all on the front page. Everyone's here. You know the evil they're doing, and it doesn't seem like they ever get punished, right? So Job is saying that. It's the same back then. It's the same here, right? They don't get punished. Why? Why is he holding back his wrath? You know, it's a reasonable complaint. Because as men in our existence where we're like stuck in this moment of time, you know, we can't see forward, we can't see back, we don't see the grand fabric of everything, right? So we're bound to question that. We're bound to see the wicked prosper. It's going to happen. It has happened, and it will continue to happen because it's in the Lord's timing, but we don't get the benefit of that perspective. Eliphaz then responds to him, saying, is not your evil abundant? There is no end to your iniquities. For you exacted pledges of your brothers for nothing, and stripped the naked of their clothing. You have given no water to the weary to drink, and you have withheld bread from the hungry. Which, by the way, Job didn't do any of this. This is just a false accusation. Again, he's called blameless. So this is Eliphaz he went from, maybe you sinned, and now he's like, you've definitely sinned, and in fact, here are some ways that you sinned, even though I haven't seen you do it. Agree with God and be at peace, thereby good will come to you. Receive instruction from his mouth and lay up his words in your heart. If you return to the Almighty, you'll be built up. If you remove injustices, far from your tents. So he's calling Job to repentance. Repent for your evil deeds, and you will be restored. And Job, I have not departed from the commandments of his lips. I haven't done that. I have treasured the word of his mouth more than my portion of food. And then in chapter 24, Job waxes poetic about how evildoers prosper and how innocents suffer, and God doesn't seem to act justly. I'll read a section here. It says, there are those who snatch the fatherless child from the breast, and they take a pledge against the poor. They go about naked, without clothing. Hungry, they carry the sheaves among the olive rows for the wicked, that they make oil. They tread the winepress, but they suffer thirst. From out of the city, the dying groan. The soul of the wounded cries for help, and yet God charges no one with wrong, which Job's wrong about, right? He just, from his perspective, that's what he sees. He sees them prospering. He assumes that means that God's not judging them, right? How then can man be in the right before God, says Bildad. This is Bildad. How can he who is born of woman be pure? Pointing out that we're all sinners, all of us. There is no righteous. Even though Job is called righteous, he's called righteous because of his faith, because of his sacrifices before God, because he has a redeemer. Not because he is righteous, because he's a redeemer, but here Bildad's pointing out that they're all sinners. And then Job responds, he glorifies God, describing his immeasurable scope. He says, by his power, he stilled the sea. By his understanding, he shattered Rahab. By his winds, the heaven were made fair. His hand pierced the fleeing serpent. Behold, those who are but the outskirts of his ways. How small a whisper do we hear of him? But the thunder of his power, who can understand? Job bringing himself back into this place of humility. He acknowledges God's scope and his grandeur, that we can't understand his ways. Chapter 27, Job still affirms his own integrity. So he keeps going, I am righteous, which he's correct about. Job cries out for wisdom, remarking about how scarce it is. There's a great verse in chapter 28 about digging for treasures and knowing where to find gold and gems, but wisdom is scarce. Where can we find it? It's great. All these chapters that I'm skipping, they're fantastic. I would heavily recommend reading them just for literary purposes. The language is beautiful. It's akin to like Shakespeare, some of these epic poems. They're beautiful, especially when it comes to glorifying God, as they all do. They all glorify God in their chapters. Chapter 29, Job finally summarizes the defense against all the accusations. He says, when I went out to the gate of the city, when I prepared my seat in the square, young men saw me and withdrew, and the aged rose and stood. The princes refrained from talking and laid their hands on their mouth. The voice of the nobles were hushed, and their tongues stuck to the roof of their mouth. When the ear heard, it called me blessed. When the eye saw, it approved, because I delivered the poor who cried for help, and the fatherless who had none to help them. He's declaring his own righteousness. Also, it kind of seems like he really misses that. Kind of like, because he goes on the next chapter, he says, now they laugh at me, men who are younger than I, whose fathers I would have disdained to set with dogs of my flock. So he starts by saying, I used to be honored. I used to be in this place where when I go into town, people know, and they honor me because I was righteous. I did good things. But now they laugh at me, and like you can really sense the venom in here, whose fathers I would have disdained. It's like, this guy's laughing at me. His father is awful, he's very obsessed with his own righteousness here. Chapter 31 is his final defense, and he says, oh, that I had one to hear me. Here's my signature. Let the Almighty answer me. Oh, that I had the indictment written by my adversary. Surely I would carry it on my shoulder. I would bind it on me as a crown. I would give him an account of all my steps. Like a prince, I would approach him. Right? Final assertion. God appears. I'm here. I'm presenting my case. So these three men ceased to answer Job because he was righteous in his own eyes. He was called blameless before God too. He was righteous in his own eyes. He has not refrained from sin, though. He did not curse God, but in what I read, he came right there. He's like right there at the edge of like, hey, listen, I'm righteous. I'd make my case before God. Before God, you would make your case that you are righteous. Right there on the edge, but he doesn't pass over. So the devil is wrong, right? Job had everything taken from him. He did not curse God. And we meet, in this point, this is a new character, right? He wasn't introduced at the beginning. His name is Elihu. He's a very interesting character. Then Elihu, the son of Barachel, the Buzite, the family of Ram, burned with anger. He burned with anger at Job because he justified himself rather than God. He burned with anger also at Job's three friends because they had found no answer. Although they declared Job to be in the wrong, now Elihu wanted to speak to Job because they were older than he. And when Elihu saw that there was no answer in his mouth of these three men, he burned with anger. So he's furious at what's going on. Both of his friends, because they're accusing him with no cause that he did something wrong. They're wrong. And then at Job, because he is justifying himself and not the Lord. So in Job's pain, he doesn't understand what's going on. And instead of saying God's right, he is just and merciful and good, he is saying, I'm right. I'm right. I am just. Well, I was speaking about why God brings suffering to us. He has a lot to say, but I'm going to cut it short. I'm going to cut a lot out. But Elihu here, he talks about why God brings suffering to us. And this to me is a direct answer to the question of why. Behold, God does all these things twice, 3 times with a man to bring back his soul from the pit, that he may be lighted with the light of life. Job speaks without knowledge. His words are without insight. Would that Job were tried to the end, because he answers like wicked men, for he adds rebellion to his sin. He claps his hands among us and multiplies his words against God. So Elihu accuses him of wrongdoing, but with direct accusations. He says, this is your sin. Look, you add rebellion to your sin. You clap your hands amongst us and the multitudes, and you multiply your words against God. So Elihu is pointing out, hey, you're overstepping here, bud. but you were full of judgment on the wicked. Judgment and justice seize you. Beware, a direct warning to Job, lest wrath entice you into scoffing, and let not the greatness of the ransom turn you aside. He's pointing out, Job, you do have judgment, and you are righteous, but beware, because if you continue, you will turn to scoffing. You will begin to see yourself as elevated, see yourself as better than, right? So this is a warning to Job. And then, immediately after Elihu's done, the Lord God himself speaks. And then the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, "Who is this that darkens counsel by words without knowledge? Dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you make it known to me. Where were you when I laid the foundation of the earth? Tell me if you have understanding." I'm skipping a lot here, obviously. Where's the way to the dwelling of light? Where is the place of darkness that you may take it to its territory, and that you may discern the paths to its home? So he's saying, you know good and evil. Where do they live? Where are their paths leading? Tell me. You know, for you were born then, the number of your days is great. Have you entered the storehouses of snow, and have you seen the storehouses of the hail, which I have reserved for the time of trouble, for the day of battle and war? So he's saying, I know, I have prepared. I have the punishment for the wicked. I have prepared for it. Where is it? Show me. You say you know. You say, well, you're complaining about all these people, these wicked people who are getting away with it. Okay, show me how. Show me. Job is ultimately humbled. All those words that he said, that I would stand and make my case. Now he has the chance, and he says, behold, I am of small account. What shall I answer you? I lay my hand on my mouth. I've spoken once, and I will not answer twice, but I will proceed no further. And the Lord answered Job out of the whirlwind and said, dress for action like a man. I will question you, and you will make it known to me. Will you even put me in the wrong? Will you condemn me, that you may be in the right? Notice, will you? Will you? Job hasn't done it yet. He hasn't cursed God. Will you do it? And then Job answered the Lord and said, I know that you can do all things, and there's no purpose of yours can be thwarted. Who is this that hides counsel without knowledge? Therefore I have uttered what I did not understand, things too wonderful for me which I did not know. Hear and I will speak. I will question you and make it known to me. He's quoting himself. I had heard of you by the ear, but now my eyes see you. Therefore I despise myself and I repent in dust and ashes. And after, and this is important, immediately, once Job repents, he's restored. That's the end of the book. He repents, and God restores him. Right? So I had a couple questions to start this, right? When I first started reading Job, I saw him as like this kind of whiny character, right? Like he goes through suffering, and he won't accept accountability and all this stuff. And I knew his friends were kind of jerks, right? This was kind of like my perspective of the book. I had jerk friends, and then God punished him for some reason. That was kind of my understanding then. I didn't really know what's going on with it. So the question that I have is, why did he suffer? I think Eliphaz puts it the best is, it's a warning. Why does God do it? To draw us back from the pit. God is not concerned with our physical well-being. That's easy, right? When God wanted to restore Job, bang, there it is, twice what you had. That's easy. He can give you the comforts of the world. That's no problem. But what he's concerned about is your soul. See, to me, what Elihu points out is that Job, because of his righteousness, and he was righteous, because of his righteousness, he was beginning to fall into the sin of pride. And in order to draw him back from the pit of death, which pride leads to, that is why he brought suffering into his life. See, God brings suffering into our lives for a lot of reasons. And you may hear from people, it's because you did something wrong, it's because you did something wrong. That's not always true. Sometimes it is. If you have repeated sin in your life over and over again and you start feeling the consequences of it, yeah, that's because of your sin. But if you're suffering and you don't know why, think of your eternal soul. God wants to draw you to him. That's why we suffer. when my daughter was diagnosed with cancer, I drew closer to God in a way that I could never have anticipated because of that suffering. In some ways, the why isn't important. We don't know what's going to happen at the end of our lives. We can't even see next week. We can't see next minute. We are restricted to this point. The why, at some point, it's just fruitless. Faith in God. If I could give a description of Job as a character, hey, he's a great man who was faithful and found his hope in God. Like, that's what I see. Despite everything, I am humbled by the character of Job in this book. It's amazing how easy it is for me to be like his friends and just assume that, oh, he's done something wrong and I'm not sure why God's doing this, so it must be because he's wrong. It's amazing how easy it is for me to do that. I know that if I were in his shoes, I probably would not have acted the way that he did. This book is filled with passages about this. The second thing that the first thing that the book of Job is about to me is about the grandeur of God. I'm going to read a passage from it. This is from Elihu. And the book is filled with passages like this. It's filled with it. A lot of the stuff I skipped are the friends declaring God's glory and majesty, Job himself declaring God's glory and majesty. God speaks of his greatness. Like, this book is about the greatness of God. And it's filled with passages like this. It's, hear this, O Job, stop and consider the wondrous work of God. Do you know how God lays his command upon them and causes the lightning of his cloud to shine? Do you know the balancing of the clouds, the wondrous works of him who is perfect in knowledge, whose garments are hot when the earth is still because of the south wind? Can you, like him, spread out the skies, hard as a cast metal mirror? Teach us what we shall say to him. We cannot draw up our case because of darkness. Shall it be told him what I would speak? Did a man ever wish that he would be swallowed up? Or now no one looks on the light when it is bright in the sky? When the wind has passed and cleared them, out of the north comes golden splendor. God is clothed with awesome majesty. The Almighty, we cannot find him. He is great in power, justice, and abundant in righteousness. He will not violate. Therefore men fear him. He does not regard any who are wise in their own conceit. And you see, Job was wise in his own conceit. God is larger than any one of us can possibly imagine. But just like Job repented and was restored, we also can be. I'll draw back to that reference to the Messiah. We know with the benefit of hindsight that Messiah is Jesus Christ, the suffering servant. And we know that our purpose here on earth is to be made into his image. How can we possibly think that we could be made into the image of Jesus if we don't suffer? God promises persecution to us. He promises that we will suffer, not because he doesn't like us, but because he wants to make us into the image of his Son. He's not concerned with our physical state. He's concerned with our soul. He may not restore us here on earth, but he goes to prepare a place for you. Right now. The Lord, in Romans, it puts it this way. This is the simplicity of the gospel. Whereas Job would gather sacrifices and he would make atonements, Christ is the sacrifice. He has made atonement. And he puts it like this, and Paul puts it like this in Romans, that if you believe in your heart that Jesus, or if you admit with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Christ himself says, if you believe in me, you shall not perish, you shall have eternal life. That is our great hope, despite our suffering, despite anything that we go through. And I don't know what any of you are going through, what you will go through. That is our hope. Let's bow our heads and pray. Lord God, thank you so much. Thank you so much for your greatness, that you are vast beyond measure and that you understand everything, that you have perfect knowledge, perfect judgment, that you have laid up the punishment for the wicked, and that in your timing it will come. God, thank you. for your sacrifice, for sending your Son to die on earth so that we might be saved. God, humble us before your throne, Father. Let us justify you and not ourselves. In your holy name, amen.